On the third morning, we got up very early, boarded the buses, and headed west. We crossed over the west branch of the Nile and entered the Giza district. Almost immediately after leaving the buildings along the Nile, we entered the western desert, and as always, there were police, this time on camels. Without driving very far, our bus climbed on a plateau and passed the Great Pyramid of Cheops on our left. After parking, we had a good but hazy view of the two other Great Pyramids, especially Khafre's, with some of its original decorative white limestone cladding remaining on the top. When the limestone cladding was smooth and bright, it must have been quite a beautiful sight. I have even heard it said that when the pyramids were new and smooth, they were covered with gold leaf. If they were, can you imagine what they must have looked like gleaming in the bright Egyptian sun? Later in the morning, the haze cleared somewhat, and this shot was taken from another angle near the Sphinx. The largest and oldest pyramid is Khufu's. He was also known as Cheops. It was built about 4,600 years ago. The second largest is the one with the limestone cap, built by Cheops' son Khafre. It looks taller because it is built on slightly higher ground. The smallest of this group is Menkaure. It is smaller but better built because it is made of hard pink granite rather than limestone. You can see the deep gouge made by later people who tried to find hidden chambers within the pyramid. I understand that it is possible to go into Cheops' pyramid, but our group only had access to Menkaure's little pyramid. The way down was long, very narrow, very steep, and stuffy. You had to shuffle, squatting down like a duck. Most people in the group did not go in. Once down inside, we weren't supposed to take pictures. But even with pictures, the rooms were not very impressive. I was the only one to bring a headlight, so I was able to scramble all over the top of the main room's barrel vaulted roof and into every recess of the tomb. And I was able to see how it was all constructed. After 4,000 years, not even wall paintings remained in that tomb, just dusty floors and cells. I'm sure glad I went in. It was for this kind of thing I've always wanted to go to Egypt. Once outside again, we could see small queen pyramids off in the haze. Looking back at the Great Pyramids through the haze. In these next three pictures, notice how lifeless the desert is here, and we are only a couple of miles from the Nile, if that far. Although we arrived very early, before it could get hot, already the vendors were setting up for the day's sales. Here was everybody's big chance to buy genuine Egyptian artifacts made in China. They had every kind of tacky junk you can imagine. And of course, the native boys were out there to sell you a camel ride. We were warned not to ride those camels because we would have to pay extra to be let down and it would make us late. They must have sold a few rides because the camels kept coming as the morning wore on. I know it's hazy, but you can see the town of Giza just below the rim of the plateau. We were not that far into the desert, no matter how bare the ground looked. We drove back to the parking lot next to Cheops's pyramid so that we could tour the boat museum, which was now open. This boat-shaped building houses the boat and a rather excellent museum, well worth the small price and trouble to get in. On the way to the museum building, we walked along the base of the pyramid and we could see the unweathered foundation stones and the weathered stones above. The unweathered stones were probably covered by sand for thousands and thousands of years, whereas the upper rocks were attacked by acids in the air and the infrequent rains, so that they were rough and pitted. We were lucky to get in because they limit the number of visitors due to all the humidity their breath adds to the air inside. Not too many years ago, the disassembled wooden parts of the boat were found in this stone block covered pit. For 4,600 years, that boat rested there, forgotten by everybody. At the bottom of the museum, they had an excellent model you could examine so as to get familiar with it before seeing the real thing. The oars were a puzzle when they were first brought out of the pit. Later it was determined that they could not have been used for rowing, but were used to stabilize the boat since it did not have a keel. Here's the real thing, looking toward the rear from about amidships. Looking forward to the prow from about the same place amidships. Looking forward from the forward section. Looking from the prow on back. Looking to the stern from the forward beam. Looking at the stern. A close-up of the stern ornament. At about midships, there was a cabin that was supposed to be the royal apartments. The oars that acted as a keel. A close-up of the prow ornament. This boat was constructed of carved logs stitched together. It had no keel or frame or planks like a normal boat. Here's a detail of how the wooden sections were stitched to each other. Most of the stitching was internal. A boat of this kind of construction must have taken a lot of caulking and was probably pretty prone to leaking. After the boat museum, we got back on the buses and headed east down to the temple complex and the Sphinx. It is not true that the French soldiers under Napoleon shot off the Sphinx's nose. Already the crowds were forming. Egypt is once again getting very popular with European tourists, especially from France and Italy. Here's a profile of the Great Sphinx himself. Moving back toward the rear, you can see how eroded the body has become. The lower section is all that is left of the right paw. The Sphinx itself is in a deep area surrounded by a high wall. You can see that erosion has erased all detail of the rear body of the Sphinx, and you can see the restoration work that has been done to keep it from falling completely apart. From the wall to the right of the Sphinx, you can see just how close the Nile was. To the right is the huge remains of Khafre's funeral temple. This whole complex on this plateau must have been a very impressive thing to see some 4,500 years ago. After leaving the Sphinx and the temples, we went to ride the camels. They are really neat critters, and the one next to me sure liked to have his ears scratched. Wide feet with no hoofs, but rather large toenails. A few of us got on, and those that did mostly thought this was the bravest thing they ever did. I was so very disappointed because I wanted to take my camel into a trot or a canter, but the camel guy wouldn't let me. The motion was very smooth and undulating. I'll leave it to you to judge which one of us is more handsome. After leaving the camels, we bussed to a French hotel within sight of the pyramids for a wonderful lunch. This was really a beautiful hotel with a beautiful garden and live birds. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't all that hungry. After lunch, we were given a choice of going back to the hotel or to visit an Oriental rug factory. To my great surprise, most people wanted to go back to the hotel. I hadn't come to Egypt to spend time in a hotel room, no matter how nice, so I boarded the bus and we headed south on the west side of the Nile. There isn't much to show it today, but this area is about where the great ancient city of Memphis used to be. And we could see the famous step pyramid of Djoser on the Saqqara Plateau in the distance. I was very disappointed to learn that we would not be visiting that region of the earliest pyramid building in Egypt. Once we got to the school, they gave us this song and dance about how the young children at this so-called school wove rugs, but really weren't being exploited, because they were also in school at the same time. Here were the poor little kids with tears in their eyes and their pathetic little crusts of bread slaving away on the hand looms. The truth is, the kids seemed pretty happy and proud to be doing such nimble and skillful work. The older artists made up for lost nimbleness with skill and creativity. We were told that this was a tour, but it turned out to be a rather high-pressure sales job. I was shown all kinds of beautiful stuff in wool and silk, and I guess they expected me to buy something. But I had no use for any of the stuff, as beautiful as it was. It was rather expensive, too. On the second story of the school, I was able to get away from the salesman and take a couple of good pictures of the Djoser step pyramid. I sure wish I could have spent a few days at Saqqara, because they are finding the richest deposits of ancient artifacts in all of Egypt. They are even finding evidence of fascinating struggles for power in the way the tombs were laid out and the stories told by them. After the rug factory, our day was over and we headed back toward Cairo. Along the way, we passed high-rise apartments that you see all over Egypt. Our bus took us back to the Palace Hotel so that we could get ready for dinner with an Egyptian family. Yes, as part of the experience, the tour company divided us into small groups and invited each group to have dinner with an upper middle class Egyptian family. Many of the people in my group didn't go, and I thought that was kind of rude of them. Later, I talked to one of the tourists who was also an MD, and he said that he didn't go because it was impossible for a family to safely fix that much food without exposing their guests to salmonella. As it turned out, that's exactly what I got, salmonella poisoning. It wasn't the worst case I've ever had, but it was annoying. And sure enough, exactly 24 hours later, as we were coming back from Alexandria, I developed those dreaded flu-like symptoms. Anyway, the experience of having dinner with the Egyptian family was really worth it. We arrived at a typical high-rise apartment, pretty seedy looking from the outside, but when we got inside, it was actually very beautiful, with crystal chandeliers and beautiful furniture. The old man was a retired civil engineer, and he had his daughters and granddaughters there at the house with us. Anyway, it was a nice evening. Unfortunately, the food did contain some salmonella, but I'll trade that any day for a nice experience.